All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to be working on Unit 2 today in the Web Developer Orientation class. I was just mentioning to the group prior to hitting record that this is one unit that's pretty darn important in terms of being a web developer overall. I think I mentioned during the startup meeting that we had that often, if you study this sort of material with other schools, they often don't even get to the point where they teach you how to use the FTP software, or if they do, it's kind of like an afterthought at the end of a semester, and you usually wait until another semester to learn it. Given that we're full stack cert and we're moving really fast, this is actually, in my mind, one of the more important skills in terms of actually making what you guys are endeavoring to do a real thing. And I'm going to just tell you that what I mean by a real thing is actually putting something on the web. So, I mean, what good is a web page if other people in the world can't see it, you know? And unfortunately, the way that we author HTML documents isn't as simple as like jumping into Facebook and creating a new post, very different in terms of other things. All right, I'm gonna say good morning to Charlie as he's connecting up. And Charlie, we're mid-progress already, and I am in record mode, just so you know. But welcome, okay. It's good to see your face.
Hello.
I'm happy everybody seems to be okay and awake this morning. We are gonna work on this technology called FTP. And as you see right here in the title of this unit, FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. And it is one of the key technologies of the internet. It is one of the most important ways to move files, especially in mass, from one computer to another. Typically, what you'll be doing when you create web pages or documents or applications is you'll create it on a machine that you're sitting in front of physically. And then when you're done with your work, you will upload your files to somewhere on the internet. That somewhere for us at this point will be Gateway's Apollo web server. That's the name of our server. In fact, why don't I just go ahead and type that web address, and you guys can do this too. But the server's address is apollo.gtc.edu. So you see up on the screen here. So basically, what we have here is Gateway's web address, the last part, which we call the domain, and then the prefix here, which we call a subdomain. So Apollo is really technically, the web address is technically a subdomain of the Gateway internet presence, but it is actually a separate physical machine that's operated by people in our department. So when you guys move on to your subsequent courses, at some point you'll probably run into one of our instructors named Christian. Christian is technically the admin that runs the server and administers it, often creates accounts and things like that. But all of the teachers in the web department are technically also administrators. So we also have those capabilities, and we often help each other out. So one thing I did this morning before I started the session is I went into my class roster and made a list of all of your names, generated usernames and passwords, and then created all the accounts on the Apollo server. So you all already have one. I know I have at least one person in the class here, Jason, that does already have a pre-existing account. And Jason, you're doing this all backwards. You're supposed to take the orientation at the end, but then again, you said you were, because of SharePoint, you didn't have to, or something or other, and I understand that. So in the old way we used to do our web degree, it was possible for people to wait to take the orientation until the end. It made no sense. And now they're doing it up front, which makes a whole lot of sense, especially when you see how we pair it up with Web 1 to help support that. So if you go ahead and actually, if you type in that web address and go to it, which I'm sure you probably have, you're just going to land on this splash page, which basically goes nowhere. Just a little history on why we chose the name Apollo for the server. When we all got here, all of us web instructors here are here for 6 years or less. We had a kind of a whole flip of a department, and all the previous web servers were always named after planets. So we had Mercury, we had Jupiter, we had constellation Gemini, and then we moved on to Kronos, which is a planet. Actually, it's actually the Klingon homeworld or something like that from Star Trek. And then when we built, got budget to build a new server, we decided on Apollo, and Apollo is the sun god for the Greeks, and being Greek, I kind of was pushing that a little bit, and I just thought it was kind of cool. Now, you guys will all get your own individual account, and what's going to happen is once you see what your username is, you're going to be able to access all of your stuff by typing that web address, and if you notice what I just did, a /, then this little squiggly symbol, and where you find that squiggly symbol, it's the shift of the reverse apostrophe key, which you usually find right above the tab key on your keyboard. Let me say that one more time. It's the shift of the reverse apostrophe key right above the tab key on your keyboard. So the left-hand edge of your keyboard, usually below the escape button and above the tab key. Some keyboards will put it in a different place. Now that symbol, that sideways squiggle, is technically known as a tilde, T-I-L-D-E. And it just basically is a little representation that you're being transported to that user's home directory on the server, and all of you have one. And you can see I typed in what appears to be like a junk username, and actually that's one of my personal user accounts on the server that I use for teaching. So I have a few of them, but this is one of my favorites. And you guys wonder, why did you name it all A's? Well, that puts it at the top of the list alphabetically. So when I look at the user list, I find it right away. I don't have to go hunting for it. And frankly, I end up typically sharing my password for this, and the students can get in there. So you can actually go in there and destroy things if you wanted to. I hope you don't, but that is just my account. Now, if I hit that, you guys are going to notice that it's going to come up with my current launch page. And I'm going to actually be deactivating most of what you see on this page because I don't want you guys to have direct access, because really what you're seeing here is all the homework that you're going to be doing, and I should qualify that, potentially be doing in this class. And you go like, oh my God, I'm going to create all those web pages. Well, not necessarily, but you will have options in some of the units on which things you're going to work on. And so like for unit 7, for example, there'll be 2 things to do, not 8, but this is my launch page, and it's nothing fancy. It's a very plain HTML page that really is just a collection of links. And I do that for a number of different reasons, and we'll talk about that. But that's just a very, very primitive example of a web page that's a functional one in terms of what we do. Now that we all have kind of like a brief intro to Apollo, I just want to point out the stuff here in the course shell that I have placed here for you. And I will tell you that when we build some of these courses, some of the courses you'll take with me, I've built all the content. I created everything there. And then because I was one of the first instructors here in our department, a lot of the others would just copy my stuff and kind of replicate it. In this case, in this course, we worked with other instructors, and a lot of the content in this course is actually a byproduct of Wendy Revolinsky, who is one of our other web instructors. And she did a marvelous job on a lot of these things. And I had a hard time saying, gosh, her stuff is better than mine. I'm just using hers, and that's okay, because we share like that. But she did a great job of like just pulling together notes for how to do these things. So let's talk first of all, kind of like hit these topics here at the top of the screen. It says FTP. What is FTP? FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. And the word protocol, anybody who's ever been in the military, whenever you hear that, it's a set of rules for how to communicate, or to do something. So, what's the protocol for making your bed? Soldier. It's like, and then you go through the steps, and really what that means in terms of internet communications is how the information is sent over the internet to get to the other end. FTP is a fascinating protocol. Like I said, it's one of the oldest protocols on the internet. And it's one that, you know, does not go away because it's so useful. I mean, if you're working on any sort of a website, having the capability to put your files on a web server, very, very important. And it says it's used to transfer files between computers on the internet, or in simpler terms, a way to move files from one computer to another. And that's really what you're doing. But you're doing it through the internet, not through a flash drive or a disk or anything like that. So early on when they were developing this stuff, they were like, well, if I'm putting my stuff out on the web, how am I going to get my files there? Do I have to like put it on a diskette and then, you know, get my car and drive it over to the server, plug it in and upload my file? You know, it's just ridiculous. So they figured out, well, if you can connect computers together and have them talk, why not have them be able to transfer files? So that's why this one's been around a long time. We are going to suggest real strongly that you use a particular piece of software to do this work. And that software is called Filezilla. And in fact, you can just take that term, give it a right click like I did. If you guys watch what I'm doing here, I just double click it. It selects the whole word. And then I'm right clicking, and you notice in Chrome, it'll say search Google for Filezilla. So I'm going to do that. It'll open up in a new tab. And the first link that you're going to hit, it'll be filezilla-project.org is the tool. And it'll take you to this website. And please don't go ahead and just willy-nilly click the download links. First of all, do not download server. Server would be for those installing it on a server. We will download the client software. So if you go ahead and click that, it will take you to this next windows. It should automatically discover what operating system you're using. So if you're on a Mac, it should say Mac OS or OS X. If you're on a Linux machine, it should say Linux, usually either Debian or some other variant. And then you go ahead and do the download. This will download an executable to your machine, and then you will follow those instructions to install it. Now, I already have this installed on my machine, so what I would kind of urge you guys to do is to actually read these install instructions that Wendy created. And I'm actually going to click through and just take a look at them. This is just a Google Doc, and she did a nice job of putting this together. So you notice how she told you which one to click on there. And then notice that, you know, if you are on a Mac, but you get the Windows screen, you would, I'm telling you that it would pop up here. It would say Mac OS. But if for some reason, let's say it doesn't, then you would come down here and choose additional options. And then we want to stay with a 64-bit version, because 64-bit versions of software generally are a little bit more stable and robust than the 32-bit counterparts, and which are really intended for older platforms. And then once you get the whole thing installed, there's going to be a couple of basic things that we do. And I think Wendy did a really nice job of showing the interface, showing where you enter your server name, username, and password. And don't worry, I will do this in real life so you can see it a lot clearer than this. And then it will show you this interface that basically boils down to your files on the left, the server files on the right in your account, and then a couple of other status screens to show what's going on. So it's not too dissimilar, for example, from working with you know, your regular file window, you know, where you have like folders and files and there's a hierarchy. The same thing is happening here. Your folders will be listed above, your files will be listed below. And that is kind of it in a nutshell in terms of what the interface is from a quick overview. And, you know, for a lot of people, that's as far as they ever need to go with it. You know, you log in, upload your files, download your files, do your file management, and sign out. Some people get a little bit more involved with it depending on what they do, but that comes with time. One thing that we also include here is you will notice inside of your grade book. So I don't know how many of you have yet to look at your grades. I haven't really graded anything yet, so there's no grades to look at, but there is information in your account. So if you come down here in the course shell and click on the My Grades link, it will take you to your grade book. And in that grade book will be a listing for your Apollo account, username and password. And if you go in there, you should see that. And the way I did it was pretty simple. It doesn't always, sometimes I do get people that have same first initials and last names. This time I was very surprised we didn't have any conflicts. So your username for your account is going to be your first initial and your last name. So Charlie, for you, it's going to be C. Jones. And those will all be lowercase. All the usernames on our system are lowercase. And it is case sensitive. So that's just the standard that we use. Your password, at least initially, will be your student ID number, which hopefully you have memorized. Some of you, most of you should have, like, I think a 7-digit ID number. I'm trying to see if that's actually the case here. Yeah, 7-digit ID number. If you only have a 6-digit one, you have to put a 0 in front of it. So David, you're in that situation. Although David isn't on the line with us this morning, so he's probably a student from a long time ago here at Gateway. Not to pick on you, David, but he has a 6-digit one which places 0 in front. All the rest of you, your ID numbers start with a 1 and have 6 digits following. If you're not sure what it is, just look in the grade book or look at your ID or any of your other accounts. Chances are you probably know it because you're using it to sign into like things like email, right? So, I mean, that's one that you have memorized, which is why I choose that as a password. All right, so the other little tidbit that Wendy put in here is why do we need FTP? As we mentioned before, you create a website, you're creating code, and you can make it work great on your own computer, but ultimately you do have to put it out on the web, and this is just the way that we do it. If you want to read an interesting article, you can click on this one, and I think what's kind of neat about this is actually from the Mozilla organization, and Mozilla is an organization that develops the browser called Firefox. And if you're not in the know, Firefox is actually based upon the original browsers from the old days, and before it was called Firefox. Does anybody know what it was called? All right, don't all rush in to answer. Justin, you got an answer? Well, before Firefox was Firefox, it was actually called Netscape. And those of you that might be older and got on the internet when it was first kind of going would remember Netscape as one of the few browsers out there. In fact, originally, originally that browser is historically one of the most important ones because it's built on the original source code of the original graphical browser called Mozilla. Anyhow, the Mozilla people did this little thing here is how the web works, and they, I think, do a nice job of kind of explaining, how web pages are dished out. Like anytime that we are bringing up a browser tab, and I'm gonna, bring up a news here just to kind of keep it somewhat neutral, and you see any web address will have this like breakdown of the domain name. The protocol is at the front, so you notice HTTPS is our protocol. Then our subdomain, which is www, although I'm going to tell you what, functionally that's not really needed anymore. Whenever you type a web address, you really only need the backend, bbc.com. The / then would indicate other resources you're accessing on the server. In some cases, and what we'll be learning first, is it actually indicates a file and folder structure on the server. When you get to more sophisticated systems, like the one that we're looking at, this is really more of a symbolic link, if you will, or a way to point you to certain content that might not have anything to do with how the folders and files are structured on the server. But where we will start is with file and folder structure. But that is how we are addressing things. Ultimately, like if you look at some of the stuff that I have here, so I'm gonna just, for example, I don't know, let's just randomly, let's click on Fish Creek here. This is one of your exercises will look like in a little bit in your Web 1 class. You'll notice that we have the Apollo address here, so apollo.gtc.edu. that little tilde to indicate that it's going to a user account. It takes you to the user account. And then it just very simply walks through the folder hierarchy that I have built in my account on that server. So I have a folder called Web 1. Inside that folder is a folder called Unit 3. And then inside that folder is a folder called Solutions or whatever, CS Solutions. Another folder called Fish Creek. Yeah, that's nested pretty deep, but that's to try to keep everything straight. And then ultimately the name of the file that we're connecting to. All right. So that's what you're going to learn. And I know initially that can feel overwhelming, this process. But the reason that we're working on FTP in the orientation class, especially so early on, is to gear you up so that by the time you get to the end of Web 1, I'm hoping you guys are not only comfortable with this, but I'm not going to say expert, but very knowledgeable on how to FTP. And then as you move forward, you are equipped with this, so any of the work that you create can automatically go out on the web and the world can see it. Another thing that we heard from employers pretty strongly is that they were astonished how they would pull in web people from some institutions who would, in some cases, go through a 4-year degree and barely touch FTP until maybe their last semester and don't even know how to do this really rudimentary thing, which to me is equivalent to like, putting gas in a motor to make it run. How are you doing this without even putting this on the web? It's kind of the mindset. So, so our philosophy here at Gateway is let's get you with those skills that are really critical for the workplace. And this is definitely one of them. The other thing that it helps to reinforce is your file management skills and understanding how your operating system kind of works with these things. All right, so that's some like good background information. There is a video here. This one is created by Wendy. So the stuff that you're going to see in the background are taken or screenshots from her class, but she does walk through how to do this. And you can see she does videos differently than I. She puts them right into the shell. I prefer to have a link so you can watch it on YouTube. It's a preference thing. But she does a nice job of walking through how to do the assignment, which I'm about to show you, but we have to like get some kind of preliminary pieces out of the way first. So the way that we have this broken down is we have it in the form of sort of a tutorial. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of walk you through this with little addendums. And the addendums are basically going to be like those little things that explain the why you're doing it, as opposed to just following some step and great, I did number 3 and it looks like it's okay, but then having no understanding of why it's okay. So for me, it's always important to kind of balance between those two things, not only the how, but why it's important, and I hope you can appreciate that. Okay, so you do have that account information set up. And what I would like you guys to all do is, if you can, please try to download Filezilla and install it. Now, I know that will take a few minutes to do. And if you are, let me just put it this way, if you are opting not to do it at the moment, want to just try it on your own later, I understand that as well. But one of the advantages of doing it here live during the session is you have me here to support you as you're doing it. And what I can do is I can hit the pause button on the recorder. So like if you have questions or you're downloading or whatever, that doesn't have to be necessarily in the video. But if you bring up a really pertinent point, I think what would be interesting about that is that I can record it into the video and answer maybe somebody else's question. Now, the one thing I'm going to ask right off the bat, Jason, I know that you're already good with this software, probably already have it open on your machine. Lisa, Justin, and Charlie, have any of you ever used an FTP program before?
No, sir, but I am trying my best to download it and pay attention right now.
And I appreciate that. Justin?
At my last job, I used Filezilla a lot, so I'm very familiar with it.
Fantastic. And Charlie, what about you?
No, sir. No, I haven't used it.
Okay. Could I ask Lisa or Charlie, would one of you be willing to share your screen so I can help coach you through the install.
I would be able to.
Okay, let me just do this. I have to actually enable you the ability to share,
Okay.
and that I got to remember how to do that first. I will pause the recording momentarily while we kind of go through that step. So I'm pausing the recording right now. Oh, so right now we have one of our students in class. He's at the Filezilla download page, just about to download and install Filezilla. So the website should automatically detect what operating system you're using. So if you're on a Mac, it should say Mac. If you're on a Windows machine, it should say Windows. So go ahead and click Download Filezilla Client. That big green button there.
It's not doing anything.
All right, try to go right over the words. There you go.
Oh,
See how,
okay.
see how it changed to to a finger pointer, and that's how you know. All right, so we are going to be using the free version. Yes, they do have pay version that's they're going to try to connect you up with, and you'll see that the professional versions have the ability to directly connect to cloud storage. And here's a little secret, folks: you don't have to pay for the pro version. You connect to all those things without the pro version too. Go ahead and scroll down a little bit, Charlie. Let's get to find those. Buttons. All right. Okay, so you're scrolling, but your screen is really zoomed in. So we have to get you to zoom out because we need you to actually scroll in that little window. But see, we're not seeing the bottom of it. So go the top right corner of your browser windows. There's a series of 3 dots.
Hmm?
Click those, and see the zoom setting there.
Yes.
Hit the minus button like once, maybe. Okay, one more time. All right, that's what we're trying to see. We're trying to see those buttons there. All right, so we're just going to work with the first version. Stop, no more.
Okay.
In fact, go up a couple of clicks.
Okay, that's
right.
good.
And then go ahead and select.
Oh, sorry.
All right, that's okay. That's quite all right. No, don't worry about the zoom setting right now. Click Download Filezilla again, the big green button on the page.
Okay. Let me get rid of this.
Yep.
Okay.
Now go ahead and click Download in the box. Yep. And that's going to start the download process from the Filezilla servers. It's not a very big file. It goes pretty darn quick. And now notice, and one of the reasons virus checkers will flag this, by the way, is because it's a straight up executable file. It's not zipped or a packaged up installer. Go ahead and just click that download in the bottom of your screen, not where your pointer is. So like you notice there's a white bar at the bottom of your browser on the far left side of that. Yep. Yeah, you can click the arrow, that's fine, and then click open. All right. Go ahead and click run. And Charlie, I'm kind of looking at your toolbar right now. What version of Windows are you running?
Windows 7 Pro.
Okay, great. My concern is that you're running one that is a 64-bit piece of software. So this is taking a little bit of time to launch, which has me a little concerned. So let's hope that it comes up on screen here. Okay, well, we tried to help one of the students here go through the process of installing, only to discover that their antivirus is kind of blocking them. And I didn't want to spend too much time, when we have such precious little together, trying to figure that out. I will tell you that the install demonstration does happen inside the videos. And the other thing that if you do get stuck installing Filezilla, it really shouldn't be that hard, but some virus programs are recognizing it as a virus, and I assure you it absolutely is not. For some of the reasons we were kind of talking about out of the recording, like a lot of commercial companies just want your subscription money and anything they can do to keep you from using free software kind of a dastardly thing, honestly. All right, let's assume that you all have Filezilla installed at this point, and then we're going to go ahead and work on transferring some files. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at these instructions. And rather than start by working with Filezilla, we're actually going to start by working on our own local file system. So what I'll have you do is go ahead and open up a file folder on your machine somewhere. And I've launched the File Explorer here in Windows so that I can do some of the file management I need to do. That's one of our first steps. And what I'm going to kind of task you to do is figure out where you're going to be storing your stuff. And for many of you, that will be in your documents or your My Documents folder, which is absolutely fine. What I would caution you against is don't use a flash drive, preferably. I know some students still will, but the problem with flash drives is they don't always stay on the machine and it can cause some sort of issues. So I'm going to go into my Documents folder here, and I typically will coach people that you can create a folder called Gateway or Full Stack Cert or whatever you want to call it. And I think that what I did last week is I created these folders here for the orientation class and web programming 1. Now, you can do this on either folder, but there's a couple of really key little steps here that I think help people when they're first doing this. I'm going to actually opt to put all my stuff in the web programming 1 folder because the FTPing is really more of a a coding thing than an orientation thing. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder here, and I'm going to call it Apollo. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to start placing all of my work in here. Now, you don't have to call it Apollo. And in fact, I don't know what the instructions here were, and what Wendy was suggesting is you might want to create a nested folder called Chapter 1 inside here. And really, how you manage your files is up to you, but I'm just showing you what I'm doing. So I created inside my web programming 1 folder, a folder called Apollo. And now I'm going to go ahead and open that. And then inside here, I'm going to create a file. But we're going to do kind of like an interesting thing here before we follow step number 2. Is I want to get you guys kind of in the habit of working, more of on a professional level on your machine. So for example, I'm going to do a right click here and kind of take you through a little bit of a process. So I did a right click, and you see I selected the new option, and then I'm going to choose text document from that list. Go ahead and click, and then you can see it brings up this little interface here where I can now type in a name. And right now, you know what? I'm just going to type test because we're just testing things. Now, I know that when you guys probably just did this on your own machines, chances are you're not seeing that little TXT extension show up. And that's a really huge issue for people working professionally with files. So it's very important for professional IT people to know what their file extensions are. For general consumer, they create a document, they give it a name, they don't care what the file extension is, it works, you double click it, it opens the right program, no big deal. But an IT pro sometimes needs to kind of take more of like a Swiss Army knife kind of approach to things in terms of what you can do with a file. And one of the most important aspects is knowing what it actually is named. Unfortunately, for most computer users, our modern devices, our phones, our tablets, our modern operating systems, the Mac OS and Windows, all kind of dumb down the file system for general usage for the general public. They don't want to trouble people with, details like file names. But for us as aspiring IT professionals, critical skill, very critical. Now you'll notice here that I have this file window open, and I think I mentioned last time that you have this little expander thing. So if you're using Windows 8 or 10, they added this ribbon menu, and you can hit this little expander to show the full menu. And I suggest that you click that and leave it on. That's my preference. And you want to navigate your way over to the View tab and then look for this box. and that is file name extensions. Now, what a file extension is the dot in the 3 letters typically, in some cases 4, that follow the name of the file. Now, that has a special meaning in an operating system. It designates what type of file it is. So in the old days, our computers weren't smart enough to recognize, hey, that's a Word document. I'll open it with Word. So what they did is they would come up with these different file extensions to indicate what kind of content it is. .txt stands for a plain text file. .doc stands for a document, etc. When we start building web pages, we will be working with .html files. Now, why that's important? If you are told to create a new document, and let's say, like if you're working in the Web Programming 1 class, you're told to create index.html, and that's what you type in, right? But you have that box unchecked and you press enter. Well, great, well, you did it, right? That's perfect. But if you flip the switch, now you see that it's not really the right file name. You actually have this extra little tidbit added to the end. And while on your local file system, it will not matter, on the web server, it will not work. So it becomes critical that that's not the case. If that is the case for you, you can always right-click a file and choose rename, and just simply go in there and get rid of that little extra like that. Yeah, it'll give you a warning. And I noticed as I changed it to .html how the icon also changed to whatever program is associated with it. So now it has a Google Chrome icon because Google Chrome is the default browser for my operating system. All right, so that's a helpful little tip. Now, even though it's kind of silly, I'm going to take those 2 files, I'm going to highlight them, and I'm going to delete them because if we don't need them, we're going to use the one that's already pre-created for us. But that's a very helpful tip, probably more helpful for the Web 1 stuff than it is for this. Now, let's go ahead and follow step number 2. It says right-click on this file. So what Wendy has done is she created a file for you, so you don't have to create it, because we're just going to practice uploading. So right-click on that, and then choose Save Link As. All right, and it'll come down to your system, and you'll notice that it has a file name attached to it, right? And what you need to do is navigate to where you are putting these files. So in this case, what I had opted to do was my Documents folder, my GTC folder, Web 1, Apollo, and there it is. And then I'm just going to click Save, and now it's in the folder. All right. Now, from the menu, choose Save Link As. We did that. Navigate to the folder that you created and click Save. We did that. If you want to verify the file opens, use Windows File Explorer. All right, let's do that. So let's go to that folder now. Now you see the file is in there. And if you want, just give it a double click. It'll open up, and you can see it's just a very simple, basic little web page that Wendy created for us that, you know, it's kind of like a little hello message. And now, mind you, this is not loaded on a web server. This is running on your own machine. And that's one of the beautiful things about working with what we call static web pages is you can write them on your machine and you can look at them on your own machine without any special software. All you need is a text editor and a browser. And it's so beautifully simple. All right, so that's the file that we have to work with. And now we're going to take that file and move it up to Apollo. So let's go and look at the next set of instructions here. All right, so we did step 6. It should open up in the default browser. And you should see something like what, okay. I guess I got to fix that. There's no image here. All right, you can close the browser and Windows Explorer if you wish. I'm leaving mine open. I tend to leave my stuff open, so that's up to you. Okay, we created the Apollo accounts. I gave you guys your username and password, and now we're going to launch Filezilla and move on to the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Filezilla here. And this is our interface. And as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, it's I'd say a pretty simple little interface. I'm not going to worry about installing the new version right now. I'm just going to click close. And the parts that we really have to concern ourselves with here are basically a few things. The one is the host, this little box here, username and password. Those are pretty obvious. but the host will always be for at least these classes, apollo.gtc.edu. So once again, you don't, this is our web server for Gateway. We don't need to add anything to the front of it. We don't have to say HTTP or anything like that. You just put the name of the host in there. Put in your username, and for me, it's going to be this, and I'll type in my password. Your password will obscure. For most of you watching this, it'll probably be your student ID number, but always check your gradebook to see what I created for you. And then you just go ahead and either press enter or click quick connect, and you are connected to your stuff. Now you can see this interface is kind of interesting. What we have here on this side of the screen are files and folders on your local machine, so my computer. So what I'm seeing here is my own C drive and all the files I have on it. On the other side, I'm seeing my home directory on Apollo, and for most of you, this will be blank. There will be nothing inside here. What I am going to do is I have to do a little bit of file maintenance here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do that, you know, and you guys obviously won't be doing this, but I'm going to move some stuff around just so that I can demonstrate what I'm doing. So if you guys can just kind of summarily ignore the fact that I have all these files here. You see that I already have Web 1 stuff, and I go through these habits every semester where I take all my old files and cram them into other folders. However, I am going to be leaving some of this stuff intact and then kind of adding it back later. For you guys right now, this will be blank. Our goal now is to get that file from your local file system and move it over to the remote file system. You can do it a few different ways, but I think it's good to kind of learn the interface. So on this left-hand side where your own files are listed, once again, top part's folder, bottom part is files. We need to navigate our way to that folder that we created where we put that file. So if you followed my demo, it will be in your documents folder. So you see how I did that. I actually went to the very top of that window and then followed the tree. Fortunately, documents appears right here. And then in the lower window, I'm going to scroll down, find my folder GTC, find my Web 1, find my Apollo. I'm double clicking on each one of those to enter. And then you see that file that Wendy gave us listed there. And now to upload it, you can do it a few different ways. My favorite way to do it usually is with a drag and drop. So I'll just click this, hold down the mouse button, move it over, and let it go. If you happen to have pre-existing folders, be careful. You don't want to go over the folder because it'll end up in the folder. See how it highlights? So you want to go to the open part of the screen and then let go. And then you see how it automatically uploaded it. Now, automatically, it's maybe not the best choice of words. What's fascinating about that is now we've moved it successfully from the local machine and made a copy on the web server. The next thing to do is to test it. Yes, automatically, Justin is correct. I got that in the chat window. The interesting thing about this interface that we're looking at too is it keeps a running log up here of what is happening. So like if you ever get an error message or something, it'll appear up here. But this is an interesting little thing to watch. And then when you get like a large amount of transfers going, you'll have a transfer list down here. So if you were uploading, let's say like 1,000 images for a website, they would all queue up down here and then you'd watch them upload. Okay, so now we have that on Apollo. Let's go ahead and see if we can access that. So we're actually, believe it or not, on this step. Now, Wendy does ask you to create the same folder structure on the server as we do on the local machine. And I will be doing that, but right now, for me, it's more critical that we can access the file. I just put the file right in that root folder. And so for me to see it in my browser, all I have to do now is type in the correct address. So I'm going to type in apollo.gtc.edu. /, and then my username, another /, and then in my case, the name of the file. Now, believe it or not, I already forgot, but fortunately it's down here in my downloads, so I can just copy it from there. So it's FTP unit, and then you notice how there's parentheses. It's important that those are correct. So /1 .html, and press enter. And then it should load up on your screen. All right. If you follow Wendy's directions to the T, and some people will, which is absolutely fine. They're going to actually have you move the whole folder. So her approach is basically this. So if I was here, and let's say I wanted to move my files, and I called that chapter 1, I could actually pull that whole folder over in the interface, and then that whole folder would move. I opted just to pull the file. To demonstrate what she's talking about, let's say this is the equivalent of the chapter 1 that she's indicating. I would just grab that whole thing and move it over. And so now you see the folder there, and I can see the file inside of it. That does change our URL though. So what will happen is, in order to access it, I would also have to add here, right after my username, the same name that we have for the folder, and then you can access it. So I do have a question. So it changes instantly. It doesn't need the APIs and servers to be restarted to take on the changes. Is this by design or always? Oh, well, Justin, it sounds like you're thinking on a much higher level here. We're not really working with any like outside library. So like what an API is, folks, is it's an application programming interface. So a lot of times when you create more advanced web applications, sometimes you'll be tying into libraries of files that you use to make your application run. And usually you have to move all those over with it. And no, there's no restart necessary. These are just plain text files. This is the beauty of simple web stuff. It doesn't need anything fancy because it literally is just a text file, and then your machine is reading it and then rendering it. So that hopefully helps. Yeah, if you get to the point where later in the semester you're doing this, and let's say you make it all the way to like the front end development classes with like Angular and React, you will be using APIs and some pretty intensive JavaScript libraries, and those all have to move with it. Otherwise you wouldn't see a darn thing, or it would look not right. But this is, you know, the primitive example of how to get the files FTP'd over. And, you know, this is something we're going to practice many times. And what I would like to do now is, why don't we take just a really quick little break. I'm going to stop the recording or pause it, and just give us a couple minutes to kind of discuss what just happened. And then I'm going to switch over to Web Programming 1 and attempt to get you guys started on doing some work there and get you on the right track. So real quick little break here. Pause the recording. Let me see if I can hit the right button, and we'll be back in just a moment. All right, we're coming back from just a little bit of a break in the discussion, and we're jumping into the Web 1 material right now. And for the Web 1 class, and most of you are in both sections, we're starting to get into what I would call like the normal workflow of the course now. We got through some of the introductory units. I yesterday released a few additional units for you. We are in accelerated format with the full stack cert. So it's, you know, my thinking is I should get as much out there as soon as possible so you guys can work ahead or at least look at due dates. I will tell you that I may be revising due dates depending on progress. That's not unusual for this class. So sometimes we hit things in stride as I plan, and sometimes we take longer or shorter, and we'll adjust depending on that. The first unit starts to talk about kind of like really the history of the web and how it works. I do have some videos down here, and I want to show you those. These now, you'll look at the data in these and go, oh my God, those videos are 4 years old yet. But the beauty of this web stuff is it really hasn't changed much since then. I will be adding the video that I'm creating right now to this collection. It'll probably be listed at the top. However, this covers all the lecture materials in the first chapter. And I would prefer mostly that you guys watch that video and read the book for chapter 1 to learn about how to, how the web works and what the basic concepts are behind it. The internet itself, frankly, has been around, formally since the fall of 1969 when they formed the first connection between the 2 academic computing centers, one in Berkeley and one in Salt Lake City in California. And basically all they really accomplished was connecting via these like giant refrigerator-sized routers to over the phone lines to a remote computer and then attempt to log in. They didn't even succeed at logging in, just attempt to log in before it all crashed and they had to redo it. But it took a number of years before the internet as we know it became what it is. In fact, it really didn't start to be called the internet proper until the early 80s when some of the private networks, some of the academic and government networks started to merge with the public networks that were forming organically over phone lines. And then when we started to combine all those networks, we had this thing called the internet. And when you think about it, and I always love this conceptually, what was happening in 1969, in the fall of 1969, actually the summer of 1969, what was like the big landmark event in human history? Well, I'm guessing that probably most of you don't remember it because you weren't alive, maybe everybody except for Charlie and I. But at that time, and I have recollections of this, in 1969, in the summer of 69, we would all gather around our like black and white TVs watching the first man step foot on the moon. And it was this momentous thing. It was like, hey, we beat the Russians there. It's so important for humans. Everything will be great in the future. And I would ask you this question, and I want you to ponder it really carefully. At that point in time, that was seen as like probably the most phenomenal thing that ever happened, the most important thing in human history. Just a few weeks later, they got the internet going. Which is really more important, man landing on the moon or the internet? And I think the easy answer there is the internet, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, that has been more transformative than practically any invention that's come before, with maybe the exception of the printing press, the wheel, and fire. I mean, it is that important. And what I think is amazing about like this weird time in history that we're going through, and kind of sitting through the riots, well, not riots, the protests last night. We were outside watching people stream by, and we struck up a conversation, and the conversation ended up like this. Back in the 60s when people would protest, they had to plan out their protests. How did they get together? They'd have to agree, well, let's all meet on Saturday, and they would call each other on a landline, right? And make arrangements. But here we are in this era where everybody's protesting, everybody's got a phone in their hand, everybody's streaming live video, everybody's tweeting, Facebooking, all at the same time. The revolution is being broadcast. You know what I mean? And it cannot be suppressed. And this is the power of the internet, because it's a decentralized network. The only way to stop it is to just shut the whole thing down, and that's not going to happen because everything we do relies on it. Banking, commerce, information, work, etc. So this is, to me, why this is so revolutionary a thing. And the fact that you guys are all intelligent enough to realize that this is a career path that makes sense, I hope you get as enthused by it as I've been over the years, because this is just starting, folks. I mean, there's a lot to do. What we are going to want you to do is take a look at that chapter 1 thing. These are all the topics that are covered in the videos, including how to submit your homework, how to do the FTP stuff. If you do watch the FTP video, this is an older video. So at that time, we were using our old server. The only thing that's different in the instructions is there's a new server name. Otherwise, that video is completely valid and all the information within it. I'm hoping that all of you had a chance to do these W3 schools pre-tests. I did look at the gradebook earlier before class started and saw that most of you have. If you haven't, take the time and do that. It's kind of interesting. Remember, you're not being graded on the score you get, you're just being graded on doing it. And it was to establish a baseline score so that we know where you started at. And at the end of the course, we'll take the same tests and see how much you improved. I guarantee you, all of you will improve and significantly. I'm hoping that all of you went through the process of selecting some possible projects, or at least thinking about it. And if you haven't yet, please do. Just read through the instructions and respond. This would be done by either typing up a document or writing to the submission area of the assignment. And then the simple FTP upload thing that we just did with the web orientation class, we're going to do that one more time in this class. So here's kind of the beauty of this. The one assignment that you just did for orientation with a couple little tweaks is the same assignment for this one. So it kind of kills two birds with one stone. And so I'm actually going to do this little assignment with you right here, right now on screen. And hopefully some of the stuff that I just talked about will resonate. And this would basically just be practice. All right, let's go ahead and go back to a file folder. So you guys remember that I went ahead and I created in my documents folder, GTC folder, web programming 1, and then Apollo. And this is where I'm going to start storing all of my stuff. So in other words, whatever is in this Apollo folder is going to mirror everything that I put on the Apollo web server. That's my objective. Now, this assignment has you create or follow the video that I have above, which is basically going to do what I'm doing right now. So if you follow along, inside this Apollo folder, I want you to do a right click, choose New, and choose Text Document. Now, you can see right now it's asking me by the blue highlight to change the name of it. I'm actually going to delete all of that, including the file extension. So I'm just using the delete key on my keyboard. And then I'm going to type in all lowercase letters, and I'm going to have to do that again, exactly this phrase, not the double quotes, just the letters that are highlighted. So index.html. So right click to rename, delete all of it, and then just type index.html. Press enter. Give me a warning about changing the file extension. That's okay. I know what I'm doing. It should be your response. Now, make sure that once again in your File Explorer window that you have that file extension capability turned on so you see those, so you don't end up with index.html.txt, because that's different than index.html. Once again, I'm going to right click this, and now I'm going to go ahead and edit the file. But you know what? We need an editor. Okay, so we do have built into Windows, believe it or not, there's a program. If you go to your start menu and just type Notepad, and it'll be the one with this blue icon here. And believe it or not, you can actually do your stuff with this program, for as primitive as it is. But I've decided over the years, and where I used to have people start out with this, that, why bother? This is such a primitive tool. I only use this in absolute emergencies, like if I'm on somebody else's computer and they don't have a proper tool. And so I'm going to actually guide you to a piece of software to install. So if you open up a browser tab and type the following, Notepad, and then a ++ after it. And this is a great starting product. So go ahead and click on this first link that pops up. It says downloads Notepad++. And they're going to have you pick a release version. And I would go with the newest one. Hey, why not? And then go ahead and download. Be really careful because, this is free software. So they do have some ads here. So this is an ad. This is an ad. But this is an actual download thing. So just be careful with that. So go ahead and click download and then launch the installer. and follow the steps that go with it. I already have this piece of software installed here on my machine. And once you have that successfully installed, you'll have a product that looks like this. Now, this doesn't look like a very fancy product, but I'm going to tell you what, Notepad++ has served me well for decades. It can write code for just about any language. It has a gazillion little plugins and stuff that you can throw in. And for me, it's like my go-to text editing tool. And I'm going to do my work with this product. A lot of newer school coders, when they're working with a straight up text editor, are now opting for a different product. And this is a freebie from Microsoft. And I know some of you will probably end up using this anyhow. And I know in the JavaScript classes and some of our framework classes, Christian and Christopher will push you to this product. And it's really optional, but it's called Visual Studio Code. It's made by Microsoft. And they have some really exciting stuff that's happening with this product right now, including Microsoft's plan to move it into the cloud, so you don't even have to install any of the software. You can just use it in the cloud directly. But if you want to try a different product other than Notepad++, and you might do it just because of aesthetics, you might think that this aesthetically looks better. I'm just used to Notepad++, so that's my go-to. But I think that this is a great choice as well. And my gut feeling is, as many of you might prefer this product over Notepad++. So if you want to go ahead and use that one, feel free. For right now, I'm just going to use Notepad++ because it's it's here and it's ready to roll. I do have Visual Code installed as well. But all I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some words to the file just to know that I'm creating something. I'm not going to write any code yet. All I'm doing is putting text in here. So I'm just going to type hello world. And if you guys don't know this, it's a classic thing that whenever you learn how to do anything in a new programming language, that the first thing that you do is you write a hello world program just to see if it works. I did get a question in the chat here. It says, is this the enterprise version? No, this is the normal version, Justin, believe it or not. It is kind of a large install, but that's because of all the language capabilities it has. And so like if you look at the language capabilities, there's so many of them that it does that they have to alphabetize it in the menus. And it shows you all the different coding structures that are built in, So you will see that, HTML is in there, but just about any programming language that you can think of is supported by this tool in one way, shape, form, or another. So, all right, anyhow, I typed in hello world. You'll notice that the tab that I have open in here is red, which indicates that the file is not yet saved. It's also indicated that it's not saved by this little tiny asterisk up here in the corner. You might not even be able to see it. But I'm going to go ahead and hit the icon here that says save. And then it's going to ask me to give it a name and save it. But wait a second, I was working with an index.html file. So you know what, I'm doing this kind of wrong. I already created the file, right? Well, if I did want to save this, I could choose to put it. Somebody have a question?
Like on unit 2, that's 2 weeks from now. Right.
Okay, I think not, but I'm going to actually go ahead and go back here, and now I want to edit this file, and I can actually right-click that file, and then if you install Notepad++, it'll throw what we call a context-sensitive menu item in, so it will allow you to just right-click and open any text file that way, or you can drag and drop it right into the interface, and it will open. You will see that the file is blank because we didn't put anything in it, but I will go ahead now and type my hello world, and I'm going to put in an exclamation point there too. I'm now going to hit that save icon, so you see that it's saved. The icon changed from red to blue to show you that it's saved. But what I think is really fascinating about this piece of software is if I have something that's not saved, like this file here, and I accidentally close the program, I'm like, oh, damn, it didn't even ask me to save, right? What you're going to discover, the beauty of Notepad++ is even if you don't save stuff, it saves it for you automatically, even if you decided not to save it. So it has like this internal buffer. And I love that feature. And you guys will notice, like, I got like, I don't know, 30, 40 tabs probably open in here because I use it as kind of a multi-purpose tool. All right, so now that we have our index file created and saved with Hello World inside of it, I'm actually going to move this out of the way. I'm just going to minimize it. And I'm going to launch Filezilla and log into my account. Now, if it looks like I might already be logged in, but I'm just going to hit the quick connect button again. So you put in your host name, apollo.gtc.edu, your username in all lowercase. Remember, the username and password are in your grade book. You can find them there. For most of you, it'll be your student ID number for the password. And then once you have those typed in, hit quick connect. And I'm just going to go ahead and connect up here. Now, I need to navigate on my left-hand side. So remember, this is your local file system over here. This is the server home directory that you have here on Apollo. So I'm going to navigate to the folder where I have my stuff. And I always like to do this, at least initially, is, you know, go up to the top of the tree, find your documents folder, find your school folder, class folder, whatever folder you're putting stuff in. And then we're going to move that index file over to Apollo. And I'm going to put it right in the root of my account. So I'm in the root folder as designated by this slash. That means the root of my home directory. And this is just going to get dragged and dropped right over. Try not to go into a folder if you have more than one folder listed. Go to the open area of the screen and then let go. And then you'll see the index file. Now we're going to go to our browser and test this again. So we're going to do apollo.gtc.edu, followed by a /, the tilde, the reverse of the, or the shift of the reverse apostrophe key right above the tab key. Type in your username and a /. And in most circumstances, when you're trying to load a web page, you would also type index.html. But watch this, I'm not going to. I'm just going to type my username and press enter. And what's going to happen here, and hey, that's not my index page, is it? Okay. What's going to happen here is it's going to load up that version. And I'm just trying to see. Okay, well, Hello World is there. So why on earth did it load the old version of my page? Now here's a little conundrum that we have with web browsers. We have this thing built into our web browsers called a cache. And what that means is when you visit a page, sometimes it stores it on your own computer in order to pull it up more quickly in the future. Now, I know this is not what I created, and you guys might run into this where you know, and Justin, that would be an extreme thing. Justin just said clear the cache. No, that's kind of like, I know, you know, burning down the house to kill a mouse inside of it. You know, that's not necessary. What you do is you either hit refresh again. So I just did a refresh, and notice how it came up. If even a refresh doesn't change it, then you do what we call a hard refresh, which is hold down your control key and press F5, and then it should load the latest version. So I think that, you know, once you catch on to that, you know, that's something that you need to know. But this isn't, folks, this is even formally a web page, but this shows me that you were able to create the file, FTP it to the server, and then access it. And then the successful completion of this assignment is to actually come in here and take that URL and submit the URL to the web page, and that's how you do your homework. That's how you submit it. Now, for some of us, you know, we'll probably want to go ahead and actually type in the whole address, the name of the file, and that will load the same thing. What's interesting is, why do we call our home page index.html? The answer to that is because that is what's considered to be the default home page name on any web server. And so if you do not designate, you know, a file name after it, it automatically looks for the index page. It is important to note, and you don't worry, I will repeat this probably a gazillion million times, that index.html must, absolutely must, be all lowercase spelled exactly like this. Not one character can be different for it to load automatically. And if it's not, all bets are off and it's not going to work. Okay. So to demonstrate that, if I type like index with a capital X .html, this is what will happen. You'll get error messages like this. Can't find the file because there is no such file on the server. Now, the irony of that is if I did that on my local file system, so let's say I just double click this file locally on my own machine. So you see the URL here, how this points to my machine is my C drive, my user folder, my documents folder, etc. That will open up the web page and give you this. Please don't submit this URL because that's not what I want. I want the one from Apollo. But here, if I change, let's say that X to a capital, here's the irony. Here it works on Windows, and this is what confuses web developers quite a bit. The Windows OS and the Mac OS both dumb down the interface to allow you to make mistakes and still get to your file, right? They don't want you to feel frustrated using a computer, so they make it easy. But professional developers need to have it precise, and this is a really critical and important skill to learn. So once again, if we are looking at this on the Apollo web server and we are submitting a link for homework, click in the address bar so the whole address will highlight, and then copy that. So you can just right click and copy, or you can do Control-C. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to Blackboard, and then I'm going to click on the assignment title to submit it. And when you go to submit it, I would prefer that you do not use the comment area. Actually, I would prefer that you use this tool here called Write Submission. And you just simply paste it in and hit submit. And believe it or not, that's all it takes. But you know, one thing I didn't do is before you hit that submit button. So if you've already hit it and it's wrong, oops, or you still can submit again. But I always tell people, once you've copied and pasted that, open up another browser tab, or better yet, open up a different browser. So I'm opening up Firefox here on my screen, and I'm just going to paste that URL in, press enter, and if it works in a different browser, you know that link works. So I always tell people, test your links before you submit them, because in some cases, as we get towards the end of the course, if you're submitting a link that doesn't work, I won't even give you your points until you fix it, because it's important that you know that. So that's the demonstration on that little piece. And then, you know, when I will get it in my grade book, I'll look at that link, I'll click on it, follow it. If I can load it up, doesn't matter what it says. If it works, you got your points. If you get stuck on this at all, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help you out in getting it to work. And, you know, it is a little frustrating if you've never done this before, because of like the specific, you know, I don't know, wants of the web server file system. You know, the web servers are very picky. Our local machines are not. So that's kind of an important takeaway too. So hopefully that helped to clarify what you need to do here. Now, in the few minutes that we have left, and we don't have a lot of time left, I kind of want to move us over to Unit 2 and get you started on that. So there's a couple of things that we're going to talk about, but Chapter 2, I want to first remind you that with Chapter 2, all the PowerPoints that the author has, and the same ones that I use to do the lecturing and the videos, are included with all the topics at the top of each unit folder. Then I will always list all the things that we're going to learn in the folder. And this one here, you know, I even have little cues as to when to switch videos. And then you'll see that I have some more modern videos here. So when I taught this course this past fall, I made some great recordings on how to do stuff. There's another FTP demo here. So if you haven't had enough of talking about FTP today, it just shows you how important it is. You might opt to just watch these videos, maybe even over the other, or even this one, honestly. But take the time as you work through each one of these unit folders and start with first, if you can, read the book, or at least skim through it and look at the topics. Then come in here and start walking through the chapter with me. So what I do in these videos, and in fact, I'm gonna click through and bring one up just so you see what it's like. Welcome back, everybody. We are going to be working on Unit 2 today. The topic of Unit 2 is walking through the fundamentals of building pages. All right, and so as you see that video going, I just want to point out a couple cool features. You can turn on closed captioning in case you need that, or in case you can't understand me, that sometimes you need it more for that reason. You can also change your playback speed, excuse me, and in some cases bump up the speed a little bit to help it go a little faster. So you see some of these videos can get pretty long. And then what you'll see is I start stepping through, for example, some of the content, and as I go, I start showing you how to code stuff, and you can follow right along with me in the video. So I think that's really helpful. So not only am I stepping through the chapter content and explaining it in granular detail, I'm also showing you how it works at the same time. And my hopes are that as you watch these videos that you do the same thing. So you follow along with the video, try the stuff I'm trying, see if you get it to work. And I think that's such a good way to learn. And the fact that it's all videoed and there, I think helps a lot. So there's a significant amount of content here. This is a pretty long chapter, and it's frankly a very important chapter too, because you're learning really all the fundamentals of HTML right here in this chapter. So watch the videos, follow along, and then get to the point of getting to this assignment. And so what we would do for this assignment is basically get you to start working with the HTML code and include all of the stuff here. So like whenever I give you a coding assignment, folks, I will typically create some sort of a specific listing of what I need you to accomplish. And in this case, I tell you exactly that. So like one thing is like one of the themes that you chose in Unit 1, you might want to choose as a theme. If you don't have a theme yet, I always tell people, just copy what I do. If you can get it to work, that's really enough. Then the next thing is you create an index page, and then you'll have to include all these HTML tags within it to earn your points. Then you have to create a second page, and we'll talk about that, or you see that in the videos. And that's the one assignment. And the second assignment that you'll typically find in each unit folder is one of the case studies at the end of the chapter. So if you have the book, and I'm going to bring this book up on screen here. I'm hoping it's in my vital source. And actually, you know what? I don't think I need to do that, because I think the back of my head said, oh yeah, here we go. So I actually put a listing of the case study instructions from our text for the first couple of units for you guys. You do need to have the book though. So this is directly from the book. And so they set up a situation, and they talk about this guy's got a coffee house called Java Jam, and he wants a website, and he has kind of like a little vision for what he wants to do, and what the website should eventually look like, and then what his goals are for this case study. And then what they'll do is, based on the stuff that you've learned by watching me and reading and working along with me, they're going to have you perform tasks based on what you've learned. So you might find yourself having to go back to the materials and like, okay, well, how do I do that? And then as you get going, you kind of get into that workflow. But they will have you, go and create a folder in your hard drive called Java Jam to contain your website. Okay, that shouldn't be too hard for you. Use a text editor, whatever one you want, to create a homepage. Right, so this is kind of what we're shooting to create in the first case study. And they give it a name. And they tell you, launch a text editor, do this, do that, do that. And they give you a step-by-step what you should type up. And then hopefully you get it to look like that. Once you have it complete, what you will do is you will take those HTML files you've created, and you will move those up to Apollo, check to see that it works on Apollo, and then send me the link. And that's how you complete your homework. I will be sharing, just so you guys know, I will be sharing the solved version of each case study as we approach them. In some cases, I might release the solutions a little bit early, and in some cases, I might wait till after the due dates. But in any circumstance, I do want you to see the correct way to do it. And the reason for that is these case studies build chapter to chapter. So if you choose to work on Java Jam as your case study, or you choose to work on Fish Creek, in the next unit, you will build upon that one to go to the next step. So I think that, you know, I think knowing that, it becomes important that whatever you've done in the previous chapter is spot on correct. Because if you keep building on mistakes, then, you know, your website's going to be broken all the way through. And I don't want to see that happen. So that's why I do give you the solutions in the aftermath. And it's kind of like, kind of getting you to the point. The case studies really are designed to get you to think on your own and try to solve the problem on your own. But there'll always be kind of that duality where we're going to be working kind of like building our own pages for assignments and then working on case studies. If you have a theme chosen for your website, as we do the personal stuff, by the time we get to the end of the course, you're already going to have your project complete. That's kind of, you know, what we're doing. So really, when I start you out with basics, and then we start adding like forms and multimedia and CSS and all this other stuff into the mix, and then you do that as individual page assignments as we go. And then by the time you know it, you got a whole website. And that's kind of my goal. So that's just a little bit of a preview. Please watch the videos. Reach out to me with questions. The videos are very, very detailed, especially the newer ones. So I strongly recommend that you use those to do your work. I do have some people that skip them, but I think for the most part, it kind of simulates the classroom environment. And normally when we would teach these classes in combination online, face-to-face, usually we would teach the orientation class for 1 hour in the classroom, take a 10-minute break, and then end up doing a 3-hour session for Web Programming 1. Hello, Python people, for joining the session. We're still in the Web 1 class. We're just about to wrap up, and we are recording, but that's you know, kind of a roadmap of where we're going. Now, once you get comfortable with these first couple of units of stuff, then we're going to start moving into other units. I did pre-release the units, so those of you that want to work ahead have that capability, and some of you will do that, and some of you will wait for me to hold your hand, and both are fine, frankly. But because this course is accelerated, we're going to start popping through these units really, really fast. So we're going to be, in some cases, doing 3-4 units a week, which is pretty intense. So if you start looking at how long it takes to just watch the videos and then add in doing your own homework with it, there comes that huge time commitment. We're almost at kind of like a full-time level of commitment here. All right, folks, I do have to wrap up because my Python people are going to start joining. But if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me via email. I will also talk to you all again Thursday morning. And we might start doing some alternate times for some of these meetings, but it seems for right now, most of us are cool with this. So I will see you Web 1 and Web Orientation people next week. So take care.
Thank you. It was good seeing you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.